We're up to our plans review panel. Plan examination is one of the most important components of the permitting process and also the most misunderstood. We believe that our panelists here today will be able to clear up some of the mystery involved. It is my pleasure now to introduce the members of our panel. If they would all just acknowledge with a wave of the hand. All fingers, please. We have to my left here Glenn Norgin, who's our residential plan examiner. We have over here Michael Lopresti, who's a registered architect in addition to being our commercial plan examiner. We have Scott Tyrone on the end. Scott is a private consultant for the town who does the back end review. Then we're going to go out of order slightly. I have on the end, I have the Honorable Harry Nicolaides, who's the mayor of Muncie Park, as well as a registered architect representing the Long Island chapter of the American Institute of Architects. Alongside Harry, who will be going though in the fourth position, is Mark Cruz, who's also a registered architect from the Long Island chapter of the AIA. So, my name, if you remember from the beginning, is Kevin Cronin. There will be a test at the end, so if you want to jot it down. And I'm the town's building commissioner. Somebody over here assigned the title of the most hated man to one of the other panelists. He stands before you right here. So, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this particular panel. Each one of the panelists will now, as with the first panel that you saw, they'll be introducing themselves and giving a little brief presentation before we open it up to questions and answers. And at the end of this, we're bumping up against lunch. You will have plenty of time for lunch. So, you know, if the question and answer runs over a little bit, we'll be okay. So if I could just call on Glenn Norgin to start us off.
Hello again. The plans review process entails the review of plans for compliance with both the New York State Code and the Town of North Hempstead Code. The result of the initial review will either be approval, the issuance of an omissions letter requesting clarification or additional information, or the issuance of a notice of disapproval for noncompliance with the town zoning code. My discussion here today will be aimed towards addressing the most common issues that delay the approval of an application. The goal should be to get an approval on the first review. So I'm going to now discuss the reasons why that doesn't happen. The most prevalent reasons why a building application cannot be approved during the initial review are, number one, the instructions on the application have not been fully complied with. The front page of each application package lists the requirements for filing that specific application. It is important to understand that these instructions are based on the requirements for filing a permit as stipulated by Town Code. Town Code 2-9 lists the requirements for filing a building permit. It requires the filing of 2 sets of plans, 2 surveys showing all existing conditions, a short environmental assessment form, a plot plan containing all dimensions and setbacks, and when applicable, the front yard setback of all existing dwellings within 200 feet. The application package contains all the forms that are required to be filed. Each of the forms needs to be completed in their entirety in order to comply with the requirements of the instructions and the town code. A second reason why applications cannot be approved on the initial review is that the plans do not comply with the town zoning code. It is important to understand that every municipality has different ways of doing things when it comes to zoning. For example, the town of North Hempstead calculates lot coverage differently than most municipalities. We do not include decks and roofed over porches in the calculation of lot coverage, where many municipalities do. It is important for the design professional to understand the town zoning code prior to their starting the design process. Our code is available online at the town's website, which is www.northhempstead.ny.gov. A third reason why applications cannot be approved is that the plans do not demonstrate compliance with the New York State Building Code. An omissions letter will be issued that specifies exactly what section of the code needs to be addressed. in order to demonstrate compliance. Fortunately, most design professionals are fairly good at demonstrating compliance with the New York State Building Code. Zoning compliance is usually the main area of concern. Unfortunately, quite often we receive a resubmission to an omissions letter that does not address every issue. The plans examiner's omissions letter should be treated as a checklist with the understanding that if one of the items is not addressed, it will require the issuance of another omissions letter, which will further delay the approval of the project. I would like to now discuss the 3 zoning issues that cause the most delays. These would be gross floor area, average front yard setback, and pre-existing average grade. The building department realized that compliance with these zoning issues were by far the major reasons why applications could not be approved. We prepared 3 handouts that dealt with each of these zoning issues. These handouts are available on the town's website and have been provided, I believe, in the packets that have been handed out today. First, let me deal with gross floor area. As previously stated, every municipality has differences in their zoning code. The town of North Hempstead definition of zoning gross floor area includes things that are particular to the town. These include, for example, garages over 300 square feet are included in the calculation of gross floor area in their entirety. Attics over 1-story areas of the dwelling are counted as gross floor area if the distance between the ridge and the floor joist is over 5 feet. And any area of the dwelling with a ceiling height over 10 feet is counted at 1.5 times the actual gross floor area. The handout deals with all these issues and hopefully aids the design professional in correctly calculating the gross floor area. The next issue is average front yard setback. In the town of North Hempstead at this time, the required front yard is either the minimum front yard established by the code or the average on both sides of the street within 200 feet. I said at this time because, as was discussed earlier, we've made recommendations to have that changed to just the side of the street that the dwelling is on. The last major issue deals with building heights and eave heights. The town code requires that these heights be measured to the pre-existing average grade of the perimeter of the proposed dwelling. This is relevant only if the proposed project includes a new dwelling, a second-story addition, or a 2-story addition. Once the pre-existing average grade is established in accordance with the code, the ridge height and eave height must be shown on the plans in relationship to the pre-existing average grade. It is also important to know that the town's definition of eave height is the top of the uppermost wall plate. It is not the actual eave or soffit, which is often different from the height of the uppermost wall plate. As I said, every municipality has variations in their code, so it's important for the design professional to understand the code for the municipality that they're dealing with. I am currently working on a new handout that will deal with how to correctly establish the sky exposure plane, which deals with how far and tall your house can be from the neighbor's lot line so that you're not blocking out their property. It's not too imposing on their property. I would like now to discuss the historic file review portion of plans review. Every building permit application filed entails a review of the historic file for the premise. This is an important aspect of plans review because it can often uncover issues that have a direct bearing on the current project. For example, we have seen applications filed for a second-story addition over an existing 1-story extension. However, the historic review reveals that the 1-story extension started out as an open porch, was later converted to a screened porch, which was later converted to a habitable 1-story addition, all without permits. The historic review compares the information that can be found in the historic file with the current property survey and plans. This often reveals open permits and previous construction, alterations, and improvements that were performed without the benefit of the required permits. These improvements could include, but are not limited to, fences, sheds within 3 feet of the side or rear property line, finished cellars, finished second floors. additional bathrooms, the replacement of original heating equipment, decks, swimming pools, retaining walls, patios, which required permits and drainage since 1998, and air conditioning, central air conditioning units, which required permits since 1962. Once these historic issues have been identified, they are included as part of the omissions letter. However, it is important to understand that these issues will not hold up the approval of the building permit for new construction. As I had addressed in one of the questions at the earlier panel, that has been a change that has recently been made. The last issue that I would like to address is amendments. Every set of plans that is approved by the town contains a stamp that reads, "No alteration, modification, or change shall be made without prior written approval of the building department." However, changes are always occur in the field, usually without prior approval of the building department and often without the knowledge of the design professional. It is important for the homeowner and the contractor to understand that they are making these changes in the field at their own risk. Many of the changes that are made do not comply with either the zoning code or the building code and will cause problems once the revised plans are filed. There have been numerous occasions where the homeowner decided to just square off a corner of the house or turn a closet into a bathroom or add a two-story portico to the front of the dwelling. These are all examples that have actually occurred and many times. Unfortunately, these changes push the dwelling over the maximum permitted gross floor area, violate the required front yard setback, or do not comply with the minimum fixture clearances in the building code. It is also important to know the difference between an amendment and new construction. Town Code 2-9L specifies that amendments shall be limited to minor changes, alterations, improvements, or modifications to work contemplated within the original scope permit application, or plans and specifications which accompanied same. This code also requires that separate building permit applications be filed for any work proposed outside the scope of the work contemplated with the original permit application. That means if your original application was for a rear deck and you later decide to build an extension to your garage, you must file a separate application for the garage extension. It cannot not be filed as an amendment to the permit for the deck. The concept of plan review is relatively simple. We are given two written codes, the building code and the zoning code, and our job is to make sure that the plans submitted substantially comply to these codes. If they comply, we approve them. If they do not comply, we either ask for revised plans to demonstrate compliance or request that the applicant seek a variance. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Presley, and I'm the commercial plans examiner, town of Hempstead. By their nature, the design of a commercial building is a complicated process. The designer needs to meld the competing issues of functionality, aesthetics, and code compliance into a coherent package to satisfy their clients' needs and requirements. My discussions today will address the code issues, where the demonstration of a code-compliant building is required for the issuance of a building permit. First, what is the purpose of a building code? Simply put, building codes provide the minimum requirements to safeguard public safety, health, and general welfare of the built environment. I review the commercial applications, and I believe that to fully navigate the permit process, and the design professional must fully understand the building prior to presenting a code compliance structure to the building department for review. Before I go any further, I need to define a commercial building. The easiest way to define commercial buildings is to say that all buildings that are not single-family residence, two-family residence, or townhouses are commercial buildings. The building code that controls commercial buildings in the town is the State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code that comprises 8 volumes and addresses issues from use and occupancy to life safety, structural stability of the building, to the heating and cooling systems, and to the maintenance of existing buildings. The issue I will address today is how the applicant can, or through his or her design professional, prepare the required documents for review. The basic approach to commercial design is to fully understand the building and its use. What may sound like a simple concept is truly the heart of the design process. For commercial buildings, or complexities of issues that need to be addressed require this understanding. The question then is, how does one understand the building in use? And how does one present this information to the examiner for review and approval? Every commercial building needs to be zoning compliant and building code compliant prior to the issuance of the building permit. It is the responsibility of the design professional to demonstrate compliance so that he or she understands the building and presents the information in a clear and concise manner. The review process may be shortened and the building permit issued in a timely manner. The unrivaled way to understand the building and present it to the examiner is to provide a zoning analysis, a building code analysis, and an egress analysis as part of the submitted documents delineating the required physical construction. The zoning analysis needs to demonstrate the setbacks, lot coverage, parking spaces, loading zone requirements. Since we cannot proceed with the building code review until zoning compliance is demonstrated, if this zoning information is not provided, the examiner must request it via an objection letter and revised documents will need to be submitted. If the information has been provided up front, the zoning review may be quickly completed and the building deemed to be zoning compliant, or the need for zoning variance is identified, and the applicant may proceed accordingly. A common problem I run across in my zoning reviews is the number of required accessible parking spaces is not delineated on the plot plan when presented with the zoning review. The number of parking spaces presented may comply, but when the building code review is performed, the number of parking spaces may be reduced due to the provisions of the building code for the size and the number of accessible parking spaces for people with disability. And if this number is reduced below the minimum number of spaces required by the zoning code, the project is now zoning non-compliant, and the issue will need to be resolved prior to the issuance of the building permit. A full understanding of the building would have flagged this issue early in the design process, and appropriate action could have been taken prior to the building department review. The building code analysis is the instrument that truly establishes the story of the building, and when prepared early in the design process, the design parameters of the building crystallize as to what work is needed to comply with the requirements of the building code. From the inception of the process, the construction type and occupancy categories need to be determined, but without that information, the review cannot proceed. The information is needed to determine how large the building may be built, how tall the building may be built, what type of passive fire separation may be required, and what type of active fire protection systems may be needed. With those design parameters established, we need to go further with our analysis, for the code regulates issues beyond the basic but very important issue of life safety. The building code controls issues of structural design, use of materials such as concrete, masonry, and even glass products. Safety during construction is another issue. Other important issues include number and type of plumbing fixtures, heat and ventilation, and the use of fuel gas within the building. The use of energy in a building has recently become a significant issue in New York State, and demonstrated compliance is required for the issuance of a building permit. One of the problems I encounter in the examination plans are the provisions for the number and type of toilet rooms required in the building. The building code is very specific in when and where public toilet rooms shall be provided and when septic sex facilities shall be provided. If not understood early in the design process, the building layout is developed, the individual spaces are located in relationship to each other, and the functional relationships are worked out, and the drawings are submitted for examination. The project is reviewed, and the issue of the location of the number of toilet rooms is presented to the applicant as an objection, and some serious redesign may be required. If this information had been researched up front and the building code analysis was prepared, the functional layout could have been developed with all of the program elements known, and the need to redesign as a result of the review would have been eliminated. The third analysis needed to fully understand the building is the egress analysis. Simply put, how does one get out of the building in an emergency? Issues that need to be addressed include the number of and remoteness of the exits, the distance one needs to travel to reach an exit, and the limit on dead-end corridors. Also, one needs to address the need for exit lights and exit signs to aid people to reach relative safety. In addition, we have issues of exit stairs, accessible exits, special egress requirements for assembly or residential uses also need to be addressed. As with the other two studies I mentioned earlier, I cannot guess the design professional's intent on how the egress system is designed, so an egress diagram included with the submission was a long way in demonstrating building code compliance. One of the problems I have encountered in the review of proposed egress systems is not fully demonstrating that the three components of the means of egress are in compliance with the building code. Briefly, the means of egress include three separate components: the egress access, the exits, and exit discharge. When most design professionals demonstrate compliance with the first two components, the exit discharge element is not always addressed. By definition, the exit discharge is that portion of the means of egress system between the exit and the relative safety of the public right-of-way. I want to be very clear with this issue. Relative safety is not the discharge of the occupants out of the building. It is the discharge of the occupants to the public right-of-way. I had one application where the front door exited the occupants to the public sidewalk, and a rear door that exited into an enclosed rear yard without access out of it. That, in effect, would have trapped the occupants in an open space. We signed the building was required to provide two means of egress. Again, an issue that could have been caught early in the design process through an egress analysis and a code compliance approach to egress could have been presented for review. A full understanding of the building and use leading to a zoning code, building code, and egress analysis can flush out the relative code issues early in the design process and can go a long way to presenting a code-compliant set of documents for review. If the major code issues have been resolved prior to the review, the issues that may arise from the review should be manageable and should be able to be resolved with a minimum amount of effort. And hopefully, with a complete submission, the length of time the project is in the building department can be reduced and in turn shorten the time needed for issues of the building permit. Before I conclude my presentation, I would like to address two misunderstandings that members of the design community present to me. The first item is the relationship of the building department to the Nassau County Fire Marshal's office. And second, what is meant by the terms demonstrate, indicate, or provide. Well, the various building departments in Nassau County, including the town of North Hempstead's building department, work closely with the Fire Marshal's office to ensure safe, code-compliant buildings for living, working, and recreational purposes. The authority having jurisdiction, the building departments, have jurisdiction for all of the code provisions of the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code. And to that end, the applicant must demonstrate code compliance to the building department. The Fire Marshal's office also has jurisdiction for enforcing the Uniform Fire Prevention Building Code as well as their own fire prevention ordinance, and may and often does review and issue permits for various aspects of the work, including fire alarm and fire protection sprinkler systems. The important point I wish to leave you with is that securing approval from one agency does not negate the need to secure approval from the other. The reality in Nassau County is that the applicant will need to demonstrate compliance and secure approvals from both agencies. The second point is what the building department means by demonstrate or indicate or provide. In the normal code review, these words have a very specific meaning and really mean what they say. The compliance with a code section needs to be demonstrated, not just stated as a rework of the comment. For example, the examiner may issue a comment that states, demonstrate that the grab bars for accessible toilet fixtures are in accordance with Section 1109 of the Building Code of New York State. The way not to respond to the comment would be, grab bars for accessible toilet facilities shall be in accordance with Section 1109 of the Building Code of New York State. This statement has not demonstrated compliance. The way to respond to the comment would be either to provide a drawing that depicts the location and size of the various units, or it could be described in a written narrative. Either way, the requirements for the grab bars have been demonstrated on the drawings, and the compliance with the requirements of the code have been clearly stated or shown. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this presentation provides some thoughts on how the design process may be managed to accelerate the review process and how we may work collectively toward producing safe, code-compliant buildings. My takeaway for today is that a complete submittal demonstrating a code-compliant building at the beginning of the review process will result in a better managed and shortened review process. Thank you.
Well, again, I'm Scott Tyrone, consultant to the building department, and I do the background reviews along with two other individuals. As I explained to the building department process panel, back-end review is the last step of review before the commissioner signs your certificates, and our job is to act as a quality control mechanism to ensure that your file is complete and the property is up to code. If your property did not get a historical review prior to the issuance of your permit, we will be doing one on the back end. A historic review entails comparing the latest plans and the current survey to the records that are on file in the building department records room. If our review finds items that have been constructed or installed without permits, an omissions letter will be mailed to the homeowner explaining what items were done and what kind of permits are required to legalize these improvements. Another part of the back-end review process is a final fee analysis. Sometimes the proper fees weren't collected, and in that case you will be notified that your certificates can be picked up once the final balance is paid. On the back end, we also do a final zoning check to ensure that it was approved and if the construction was actually built to code. Most of the permits we see today are bringing the homes to their maximum gross floor area, maximum lot coverage, setbacks, and heights. At the very end of the job, we will type the final certificates, so we must combine the scope of work that was listed in the computer system, along with any amendments that were filed, and put the language together to make sure that the final certificate encompasses any additional fixtures, porticos, or any other additions that may have been added during the process. If any problems were discovered during the back-end review, you will be notified by mail as to exactly what issues have arisen and the contact information of the person who conducted your review, just in case you need any further clarification. As a homeowner, contractor, or a design professional, it's recommended that you look over all the paperwork before you submit it to the town and make sure it's complete. Some of the common issues that come across that require an omissions letter instead of a certificate is problems with the final survey. In 2009, the town issued Commissioner's Memorandum No. 1 of 2009, which is available on the town's website, and this memo lists the requirements of a final survey. The most common problems we see with the final survey is that they have disclaimers on them, which basically state that the dimensions and setbacks are not to be used for construction purposes. Since this is a final survey submitted to the town, we need those setbacks and dimensions certified to ensure that the project complies with the zoning code. Commissioner's Memorandum No. 1 of 2009 also requires that the survey be certified to the town of North Hempstead, and it requires an original stamp and signature of the licensed land surveyor. For some reason, we see many surveys submitted to the town that have photocopies or stamped signatures instead of originals. So as a homeowner, it would help expedite the process if you took a look at the survey before you hand it to the building inspector to make sure that it meets these requirements. Other items that should be on the final survey are the dimensions of the new addition and setbacks to the property lines. A lot of times we see porticos and decks that were part of the scope of work, but the surveyor didn't provide any setback or dimensions of these structures, and an omissions letter has to be issued so that we could obtain this information to see if the addition complies with the code. If your construction project involved a second floor addition, a two-story addition, or the construction of a new home, it is necessary for you to have the even ridge height provided on the final survey. It's recommended that once you pour the foundation, it's actually required that you should be calling and getting a foundation location survey to verify that the foundation has the correct setbacks, and it's the actual dimensions that you propose in your plans. The survey should have on it elevations of the top of the foundation. If the foundation, it's the building block of your building. If the foundation is larger than what was proposed, it does not have the proper setbacks that were proposed, or if the foundation was poured higher than was proposed, please call your building inspector before you go any further since these issues will impact the zoning and could require an amendment or possibly a trip to the zoning board. It'll be better to discover any of these problems early in the process instead of waiting to find out that the final certificates cannot be issued because the dwelling now has zoning issues and need to be addressed after the fact. If a historical check of your property is needed because the permit was issued before 2007, we will conduct one on the back. When you apply for your permit, you're required to submit a survey of your property. On the back end, we compare it to the front end survey, and we're going to be looking for any improvements such as patios, decks, HVAC units, swimming pools, retaining walls, accessory structures, fences, cellar entrance, or any other structures that may have been constructed without permits. If any of these items were constructed without permits, we will be mailing you a letter explaining which items you need to maintain. We also see problems with electrical certificates that are submitted. Some common problems with the electrical certificates are they do not cover the full scope of work that was listed on the application. If you're doing a second floor addition, but you're also conducting interior alterations on the first floor, the electrical certificate must include the first floor too. Another thing is to ensure that if you're installing new HVAC units, that these units are included on the electrical certificates. On commercial jobs, it's important that the final survey shows the parking lot striping and also that the size of the parking stalls is noted and the aisle width is provided. This information is required to verify compliance with the zoning code and any BZA variances that may have been issued or any site plan approvals that may have been adopted by the town board. I can't stress enough on the commercial, we see a lot of bathrooms on the back end and the bathrooms were not handicap accessible. We have had problems where on the back end the bathrooms do not meet the proper clearances and at the end either have to be reconfigured or state variance. So, other problems with commercial projects are non-compliance with either the BZA variances or the approved site plans. If you've been granted a variance that has conditions, please read them carefully and ensure that every one of them has been met. Sometimes they require that the applicant submit contracts to the town showing carrying out garbage service, or they might require a certain planting area or signs be posted on the property, and it's important to verify that these items have been complied with before you call for your final inspection. Lastly, if you need sign-offs from the fire marshal's office on either a fire alarm or sprinkler system, please ensure that copies of these sign-offs have been submitted to the building inspector so they are part of your file. I know there's a lot of information that was given to you, but I just hope it gives you, a little peek into what we do on the back end. And if you do get an omissions letter, you can either call or email the person that issued it, and we'll walk you through the process. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Harry Nicolaitis. I think I was introduced both as a mayor and as an architect, so I have a couple of hats that I wear. I'm curious who's here today. I see a lot of architects that I recognize. How many people here are from the real estate community? And how many people here are contractors in the construction community? Not that many, okay. What do the rest of you do? I guess the rest are public officials, huh? I thought it'd be good for my role here as a speaker to identify really the role of an architect. And we've heard a lot of technical information both from Glenn on residential and from Michael on commercial, so I won't really try to repeat it, although it is part of what we have to do. But if you break down the role of the architect, I believe it falls into four pieces: educate, research, document, and administrate. The first part of education really starts with the real estate community. So I actually will speak to the real estate brokers here. What's important and very often forgotten is to bring the architect in the beginning, not after the fact or when it's kind of too late to help. So if you're representing a buyer or a seller, it is important to have the architect as part of the team that may help the buyer find out if the building is compliant to what they want to do, if it has a lot size or setbacks or a rear yard that's big enough for what the new buyer's goals and dreams are. All too often we get called after the fact with Susie who wants to build her big media room, except there's no rear yard big enough to build it, except she already bought the house. So it's very important. We get commercial clients who want to build a medical facility in a building that's not zoned for medical use, or doesn't have the adequate parking for a change of use. This is where really the architect comes in advance, can do a quick zoning analysis, can do a walkthrough for building code compliance, and acts as a very valuable component of that purchase. Some of my most grateful clients are the ones that didn't proceed to buy something after we advised them what the property can and can't do. It may hurt your commissions, I'm sorry to say that, but at the end of the day, I think you want a satisfied customer. The research side of what we do is when we're first engaged, we usually will ask the homeowner or the property owner, what do they have on file? Is there a survey that they have that's current? Do they have any plans? Do they have any elevations? Do they have any surveys and site plans? These are all important first steps for the architect, and if they already exist, can save the client and the homeowner a lot of money. What we don't find, the next step of the architect, and I'm sorry to bore all the architects I know in the room here, but the next step is actually to do research at the building department. I can't tell you how many times I've actually had homeowners call me and not know if they're in a municipality in North Hempstead or if they're in an incorporated village. There are 31 incorporated villages in North Hempstead alone. So that's a big bite of North Hempstead that actually doesn't even respond to or deal with the town of North Hempstead's zoning code. Our building codes are the same. That's something that some people get confused, and I think very often we have to help educate people what's a building code matter and what's a zoning code matter. The building code is run by the state of New York. We all answer to the same code. Different building officials will interpret it differently, and that is something that is part of the conversations today. But the zoning is actually created by the municipality. So Muncie Park has its code, and it's known far and wide to be fairly strict and very restrictive. And we encourage our residents to know that before they do anything. The town of North Hempstead has its zoning code. Conversations about changes to the code today are really only conversations about changes to the zoning code. The town really can't change the New York State building code. I think they'd like to in some cases, but they can't. So that's part of where our research goes in. We do a zoning analysis, we do a building code analysis, we review if there's any approved permits already on file, if there's a C of O on file, if there's any variances that were granted that have restrictions on the property. The next step in our role is documentation. Our responsibility as architects indeed is to produce the construction documents, a proper site plan, submit to the plan examiners the zoning analysis and life safety analysis that you heard about. But also it's important for the architect to decide who else we need on board. We may look to the owner and say, well, we need a structural engineer. We need a mechanical or plumbing or electrical engineer. We may tell them we need a surveyor to come back because the survey isn't appropriate or complete enough. This is all part of the documentation phase. The last phase for our role is really administrative. We're the ones who collect all the parts and pieces to make that application complete. We speak to the contractor, the plumber, the electrician. We get the proper documentation for their licenses, for their workman's comp, disability insurance, and to make sure their licenses are current. This can hold up an application that otherwise can go very quickly. We'll also be the ones determining if we have to go for review for a fire marshal, for Board of Health, or any other special agency that's involved in a larger commercial project. If you have a church or a large public assembly facility, there are certain separate permits that need to be gotten before you can close a project out. But what's really important is not to send the architect home after you bought his plans. The architect's role is very important throughout the construction process. Somebody mentioned about changes made during construction. This is the kiss of death for many projects that ultimately end up, particularly in a residential scale, with problems getting a C of O when you're finished. Sometimes a well-meaning homeowner makes a change, doesn't realize that changing it violates a zoning ordinance, or changes something that's life safety because a window was modified or replaced that was really a window that's part of an egress package. So these are all important pieces to keep the architect around. Let them be part of the role. I know that there's a tendency for homeowners to want to speak directly to the contractor, but we're really your agent. We should be the conduit back to the contractor, and that saves a lot of grief on the end. Thank you.
Good morning. Supervisor Kamen, the Town of North Hempstead elected officials, employees, residents, business owners, my colleagues, and industry associates. My name is Mark Cruz. I'm a registered architect in the state of New York and the 2011 president of the Long Island chapter of the American Institute of Architects. I've been practicing on Long Island in the architectural profession for 27 years. I've closely worked on numerous projects ranging from multi-million-dollar commercial development to small-scale residential improvements and legalizations. Over the years, one constant that has remained, and that is that a successful project always includes a harmonious relationship between all parties. This begins with the understanding and appreciation of each participant's individual role throughout the construction process. This relationship and understanding must begin in the early stages of any projects, and the importance of such an ideal must be championed along the way. Our efforts on this panel over the past few months have been to discuss, assess, evaluate, and implement policies and guidelines that will effectively bring about positive change in this area known as the Building Department Plan Review phase. Our panel throughout this process has carefully considered the factors from all sides of the aisles as they relate to the Building Department Review. We have hopefully demonstrated that our efforts are mutual in creating a process that is both codes compliant to the highest standard, as well as streamlined and efficient to create and continue economic growth in the town of North Hempstead. The importance of developing a complete and comprehensive set of code-compliant construction drawings is paramount to the efficiency and timeliness of this critical stage of development. It is our responsibility in our offices and our lives to set the standard of practice to that which conforms to this principle. Our role in educating our clients and the public of this standard is equally important to us guiding each other to be responsible citizens and members of society. I encourage everyone to reflect upon the concepts and guidance that we are fortunate to be receiving today as a result of this discussion, and implore each of us to use this in our daily practices and interactions. Each of our panel members have provided useful insight that we can bring back to our offices and begin using immediately. The Long Island chapter of the American Institute of Architects is dedicated to the education, support, and success of its members and the public. The information from today's conference and more will be made available through the Town of North Hempstead's website, our chapter office over the next coming weeks, and we encourage each and every one of you to contact us for follow-up to navigate through this process. We anticipate continued cooperation with Supervisor Kamen and the entire Town of North Hempstead while maintaining an open dialogue and willingness to engage in panels such as this and to further enhance the industry. It is with this model of communication and practices that will lead us to a better built environment for us to work. On behalf of the Long Island chapter of the American Institute of Architects, I would like to thank Supervisor Kamen and the entire Town of North Hempstead for your tireless efforts. I applaud you for your courage that it takes to make these necessary changes for the success of your township.